Welcome all, and today, a very absolute honor to be sharing the stage, and I'll go in a moment in the introductions. I'll start with myself. I'm Supriya. I am VP and Head of Data Science and Analytics with BBDO Atlanta. It's a marketing agency for those who don't know. So welcome again, and to set the context on what we are going to discuss in the next 45 minutes. So data is often called the new oil, but unlike oil, it shouldn't be a scarce resource limited to a few. So our panel today will explore what it takes to make data and its insights accessible, understandable, and actionable for everyone, regardless of role or technical expertise. With this, I'll start from this side. So you want to go for a short introduction?
Hey guys, Russ Johnson. I'm from Piedmont Healthcare, and my role there is on our business intelligence team to lead project delivery. And when we say business intelligence, we kind of group all of the data functions into BI. So think of it from data ingestion or ETL all the way to the front end presentation in either a dashboard, a report, a data set, or even a machine learning model. And the other aspect of my role is hiring folks to join our team. And I was kind of curious as I was thinking about how the four of us ended up on this panel. And I was thinking that, well, Amelia must have just trying to find the most gullible people to get up there, starting with the largest titles. And when I got in here this morning and realized how many people were here, I was like, man, she has to really, really go down that list really far to get all the way to me. But happy to be here and share, and looking forward to learning from you guys.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Mustafa Nisar. I'm the Director for Exploratory Data Science at the Home Depot. Our teams support data science for a few of our verticals. Customer experience is one, as well as contact centers, and we also lead data science initiatives for aspects of our delivery and pro business. Looking forward to the conversation.
Good morning, folks. My name is Peter Martinez. I am a product marketing director with Alteryx, and really my focus area is cloud analytics and generative AI. My role there is to partner with the product team, partner with sales, determine what our customer needs are as far as analytics products are concerned, and determine what the next path should be for what we build. Before I joined Alteryx, I actually was with Gartner for 5 years in the consulting practice there. And during my time at Gartner, I did a lot of different things. I did a lot of model building. I did a lot of budget analysis with CIOs. But I also did a lot of programmatic enablement and strategy work with data and analytics organizations across all different types of verticals. So everything from financial services and healthcare to public sector and commercial business as well. Really excited to be here with these awesome folks up here for this panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So you'll see a bunch of data geeks here now. So I'll start with Russ, and here's my first question to you, that how can organizations ensure that data-driven decisions making is accessible to non-technology or non-technical employees?
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to data management and organizational management. And I was trying to think of what I think is the best method, and I came to the conclusion that there's not necessarily a best method, but you really have to fit the method you choose into your organizational structure. And I think there's kind of two main approaches. You can invest in technology and tools and bring in, call it in-user friendly tools, or you can invest in your people. And I don't think there's necessarily one way that's better or worse. It's just what fits for your environment. Alteryx is actually one of those tools that are pretty handy for folks who are not super technical if they need to just prepare their data. I've been with other companies where we've gone with that approach, where we've invested heavily into our tools, trying to help the non-technical users. But the approach that we've taken with Piedmont is actually the inverse, where we've, instead of putting our money into our tools, we've put our investment into our people. And by doing that, we bring in very talented folks who are creative and innovative and built kind of our own tools that are useful for getting data into the right format. And then we're using those processes to create certified data sets that we exposed through our chosen tool, which happens to be Tableau Server. And then we enable our end users to leverage Tableau Desktop to get into those data sets and build their custom data sources or data visualizations as needed.
Wonderful. Mustafa, do you have any point of view here? How are you managing accessibility to non-technical, especially I'm focusing here on non-technical employees, so who are scared of probably programming. So how is your organization managing?
So this question reminds me of a conversation we have been having around how to make insights and essentially LLM capabilities accessible to our product and UX teams. So a few of the leaders and we connected, and one of the perspectives that we had is that what will make each of the functions more successful for the roles and decisions they need to drive. For example, when it comes to user experience discovery, identifying friction points of customers that we need to solve, we often have a lot of unstructured data sets, whether it's through customer feedback, whether it's through aspects of measurement, that can really help build a perspective. Say, okay, you know what, this is the most prominent problem, this is a deeper dive into the problem. Now, data science capabilities like LLMs have a significant capability to expedite that path. But then we talked about governance. And when it comes to solving for this, we discussed that, yes, when we are looking to build a recommendation hypothesis, we definitely do not want to have restrictive guardrails. But what that means is that we would allow our product and UX teams to be able to leverage these technologies without the need to have a report or a dashboard created prior for their consumption. But then when it comes to truly aligning on the strategy and execution or approach from a data and technology perspective to pursue a solution, we would want to ensure that we are aligned to a validated set of provision data output that can put everyone on the same page. So this is just an example of what we're thinking at the Home Depot.
Wonderful. And Peter, you come from Alteryx and popularly known for non-coding platform. What are your views on this?
Yeah, so I'll just emphasize what both of the panelists have said here. And I come, again, from a consulting background, so I tend to think in framework orientation. And I think when you think about this question, right, you want to ensure that data-driven decision-making is accessible for non-technical employees. I think with whatever you do, you have to take a holistic approach. So when I think about what the critical factors are to thinking about that, it's your process, which both of you have described. It's your governance, it's your tooling, and it's your people, right? And so if you can have ways to think through all four of those different pieces of the puzzle, I think you're gonna set yourself up for a lot of success, because the reality is all of those things exist on a continuum, right? And for some use cases or for some problems that you want to solve, you may need more rigor in one of those areas, or you may need less, right? You may need more technical tooling, or you may need more approachable non-technical tooling. You may need more rigorous process, you may need less rigorous process. In some instances, you may want to provide end users with a clean, curated data set. In other instances, you may want to provide them with a complete polished and finished product like a PowerPoint deck or a dashboard. So I think having that framework in mind and then really taking a use case-based approach where you can think about the different use cases, what you want to solve for, and thinking about those four different dimensions for each of those use cases, I think can bring a tremendous amount of value and success to organizations.
Nicely said. And when I was actually looking at this question, and I'm actually reminded of a very popular quote from very popular CEO that create computing technologies such as nobody has to program. And well said, that's what we are, I think, progressing towards. My next question is for Mustafa. And what are the biggest barriers to democratizing data across an organization, and how can they be overcome?
I would say when we think about barriers, one would be access. I'll just take it the barrier and potential paths to removing the barrier. What we found is that if data sets exist in silos and they're not connected, it can mean that the decisions can be incomplete. For example, from our perspective, if we are looking at, because of the size of our organization and the acquisitions we have, let's say we have certain delivery-related data sets for a particular type of fulfillment path, let's say from store pickup, and that is disconnected from the customer's digital experience data, it can be an incomplete view of the customer experience. So a path to remove those silos is to bring them in potentially in a cloud type of environment where you do have the right access controls implemented, yet it doesn't require implementation, pipelining, and integration efforts to make them accessible. It's very important at the same time and this would be the second barrier, is governance. Governance is a part and parcel with everything we are going to do, and it shouldn't be an ad hoc decision. So having a process to implement governance based on the sensitivity of the data set and the minimum amount of exposure needed to make the qualified decision is a path to that. And for me, that minimum point is very important because PII of customers and sensitive data should be protected, but often can be anonymized for purposes of aggregate, segmented insights. So there's also that aspect of what level of depth do you need to be able to inform your decision. Yeah, those are a few of the things I could start with. Yeah.
And Russ, do you have anything to add here?
I was going to ask you if you could say the question again.
Sure. So what are the biggest barriers to democratizing data across an organization, and how can they be overcome?
Yeah, so to add to what Mustafa said, access is huge. Another one is processing power, or what can your technology handle? And if you think about it as an end-to-end process, or almost like a data factory, you have to choose which constraints you're going to fight. So the more access you grant, the more technology or horsepower you're going to need to put behind it. And vice versa, if you put more horsepower behind it, then you're kind of overfunding your environment because you don't have a lot of folks having access. But I think data governance, or the broad category of data governance and all the practices that entails are what are going to enable you as an organization to expand access without having to just massively scale up your technical infrastructure to support all of the different queries and use cases. So the short answer, I guess, would be the constraints are access and technology, and the solution is broad scoping data governance policies and procedures.
Nicely said. And in my opinion, and I have observed in my career span as leading the data science team, I felt that it also depends on where the organization's data lifecycle is. If an organization is just starting off, they are small, probably big, but if they are just starting off, they still are figuring out where they want to store the data. So they need a solution that needs a data warehouse or a data lake. If they have started out, but they don't know how to tell their non-technical folks to get into the data, then they need smart intelligence, business intelligence tools. So this has been my observation, and of course, well said in terms of getting access, the governance, and also taking care of our people.
I got to say that sounds like a pretty magical situation to walk into a relatively, call it data immature organization and be able to stand everything up the right way the first time. My observation is that 2024, most organizations have had some type of data function for years or even decades, and the main challenge is taking newer processes, technologies, procedures, and kind of retrofitting them to what's already been established without interrupting the existing business processes so that you can get the best end result out of your data. But starting from scratch, that sounds great.
Absolutely. Pivoting to next question, and Peter, this is for you. what do you see as the greatest opportunities of democratizing data in improving overall business outcomes? And what are those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will start this one by speaking a little bit about my experience as a consultant, which was that oftentimes when we would come in and help data and analytics organizations get better, we would usually start with a maturity assessment, just to figure out where they're starting from. Because if you don't know where you're starting from, it's really hard to figure out where you need to go. And it's really hard to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself about where your starting point is. Now, organizations in different industries, they typically have different maturities, but usually what we would see is like on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being you are the most mature, most finely tuned data and analytics organization in the world, 0 being you have nothing. Most organizations were somewhere around a 2.2. This is most organizations, and these are organizations that have advanced analytics functions, right? And yet still struggle with some of the basics, like some of the basic blocking and tackling. So I really truly do believe that every piece of analytics is important, but there's tremendous value that's yet to be unlocked in just nailing the basics. Now, when you think about what so many people do on a day-to-day basis, there's opportunity to unleash analytics into almost any function, any business area. But sometimes just being able to get a grip on simple descriptive statistics, or I bet many folks have run into this, getting folks in different departments to agree on a number even, like a basic statistic or a basic count, can sometimes be way more challenging than you would think. So I actually think there's a lot of opportunity in just nailing the basics and getting some of those foundational elements down. Not to mention that when you do that really well, and that incrementally moves your maturity forward, that does set you up to be able to take on more advanced analytics projects as an organization and to do them well, right? And to not potentially waste resources, spinning up resources and then running into bottlenecks or running into organizational conflict or resistance to change or things like that. And I think the outcomes can be numerous. Like I think the outcomes that we often see is specifically from analytics, there's always an emphasis on operational efficiency, right? Like, hey, how much faster can we do this thing if we automate the analytic behind it? How much faster can we get to an answer? But I think for any business, you're always going to be looking at ROI. You're always going to be looking at, are we unlocking some type of new revenue? Are we reducing costs in some way? And I think those are outcomes that are very, very achievable with analytic environments.
Mustafa, do you want to add that what are some of the opportunities providing access to data can do to the business impact?
Yeah, I think when the business impact piece seems key to me. So what I would say is that the entire life cycle from strategy to execution to optimization should, if it's required to be backed by data, and then also driven, impact, qualified and quantified by data, it forces all partners to come to a common ground. For example, if we defining OKRs, objectives and key results, when we are defining roadmaps, we need to establish what are the metrics that collectively we want to influence as partners. If we are doing that, then as we start building out a plan on exactly what to execute on our roadmap and also aligning insights and let's say sizing and business cases back to that same common understanding of performance in data, it puts everyone on the same page because you're marching towards the same direction. And then finally, even when the data science team build models or perform analyses, all of their work should also tie back to those common set of aligned metrics and targets. This really puts everyone in a codependent state and really takes out often friction when just the socialization of metrics and the metrics being targeted can be different. So I think that's a big opportunity in this area.
Well said. I'll pivot to Russ. And Russ, this is all not easy, right? I mean,
That's why we have jobs.
Yes. And you mentioned that there is no magical formula to get to those uncover the needs. So what are some of the challenges that you see while getting into the vision or a goal of democratizing and providing access data to everyone in the organization? So what are those blockers?
The blockers to democratizing data? I think I kind of answered this in my earlier one, which is the access and the technology horsepower. I guess a third pillar to that would be the head count that it's going to take to support all those end users. And the more people you have with their hands on the data, the more questions are going to be raised. I actually want to take a step back and kind of add to the question that you asked Peter and Mustafa. One of the biggest benefits to data democratization from my perspective is that you're getting data into the hands of the people who have the most context for that data, which is the true data owners, which should be the business. It should not be data personnel. If you choose to do a centralized data team, there's pros and cons to that, but with a centralized data team, the data team is not going to have the context or what is the meaning, the true impact of the business process of the data that we're analyzing. And you kind of have to bridge that gap. If you do true data democratization, which I think is great, you have to have people with data skills in the business. Not all companies are structured to make that work. We're kind of building out what I would consider a hybrid between those two approaches, which is we're rolling out a product management strategy, which we call data hubs. And the concept there is that we as a data team, we're here to support your data needs, but we're going to be fully partnered with our business partners and have them listed as kind of the brand owner of data products that we are producing on their behalf. And we have them do all of the prioritization of what's the next big thing that we've got to tackle. So it's not just the data team driving what's going to happen, but really the business telling us what data and data products they need to drive the business forward.
I have a follow-up question.
Bring it.
So, and it is, I could be wrong because this is my observation that not all the time business people actually know what they're asking for.
And that's the value that we bring. So I give the analogy to our team quite a bit, or to when I'm interviewing a candidate, that our people have to have more than just technology skills. That you can't just be a SQL person who wants to code all day, but you have to have the curiosity that a true quality business analyst or BI analyst needs to have to be successful. And what I mean by that is, you're right, a lot of end users don't really know how to ask the question to get the answer that they really need. The generic thing is, I need a report. It's always, I need a report. And sometimes a report actually is the solution, but not always. And our folks, we really charge them with, hey, when you have a generic request that says, I need a report, you have to ask the questions of why. What is the problem that you're trying to solve with this report? If I give you the report in this structure, will that solve your problem? Or are you just getting the report so that you can try to download the data and take it to the next step? Let's start with the end in mind and say, what's the actual problem you need to solve? And then we'll work backward from that to determine what data solution is actually going to meet your needs.
Mustafa?
Supriya, if I can just add to that. Yeah, so,
Yes.
Tie a couple of these concepts together. We all talked about access, and we talked about this idea of the capacity. And I love the analytics factory. It's like one of my favorite analogies. Like, if analytics is a factory, you're going to have bottlenecks in certain areas. And so one of the things that I really, really believe in is if you can get different personas in the org to partner together to create the access for you. So what I mean by that is, can you have a data engineering team that's maybe responsible for like the first set of curation? So for example, they are the ones that know where the PII is in the data set that maybe shouldn't get pushed out into a curated data set out to the business for a use case, right? Let's just talk about a sample imaginary use case here. But one of the things that Russ was talking about that I think is really, really valuable in analytics is like, there's so much ad hoc analytics that happens. And I think a lot of it happens because oftentimes when you're a business user, you have the domain context. As soon as you answer one question, you want to go and answer another one. Like that might spark another one or another one, and that process continues. And the quicker you can iterate on that, the better off you are. And so I do believe that like if you can find ways for those ad hoc use cases, which is what I think a lot of sort of business domains face when it comes to some of the more basic use cases, if you can find ways to just control the data that they're getting and then give them the ability to do that 10% of like data manipulation or data investigation or whatever on their own, you can unload a lot of capacity off to them to be able to do that. And they have the context to be able to do some of that exploratory analysis on their own. And then if they have sort of that ability to come back into the experts, to bring them back in, maybe to move something from a proof of concept into like a production environment, or maybe to go deeper into an analysis, or to take something that's more descriptive into the next step of like a more predictive project, for example. I think that's where you can start to see a lot of things come together in a really cool way.
Mustafa, what do you think how we can increase the literacy and let business be more educated on data?
I think there's an overall point about demystifying data democratization, which in my opinion means different things to different types of users and decision makers. For example, there's going to be business leaders and business partners who are focused on performance. How are we doing? In order to achieve that, you do want to be able to say, hey, you know what, BI tools, the key metrics as aligned with partners are available, and they will continuously give you, whether it's performance or also forecasting. Then, you know, there's going to be more, users are going to say, why is this performance what it is? And that's where you get towards analysis. And in order to perform analysis, those business leaders may not be the users, but let's say product and analysts in the teams need access to deeper dimensions and associated metrics. And you know, opportunity there, especially with the ability that we have with the large language models and Gen AI, is if we have a knowledge base that's trusted and comprehensive, we can apply the ability to not have those questions, even if the question is ad hoc, it not requiring ad hoc effort. By essentially training models to correctly answer, to an extent, a deeper level of questions. Then finally, when it gets to prescriptive, and we're moving towards insight, what can we do to improve? That's where you need to be able to provide access to the users that can actually look at the underlying data sets and kind of, you know, not only build insights, but then also start exploring to say, okay, you know what is a data science potential solution to impact it? So with these examples, the overall point is when it comes to data democratization, it's not all or nothing. And it's really about what level and what type of data visibility and access is going to really help drive the action that's needed at that part of the journey and by that set of users and leaders.
Mustafa, you mentioned briefly that leadership may not have a direct role to play in that particular report probably, but then what is the role of leadership? How can they come and make sure that the efforts are across the organizations?
Yeah, the role may not be to develop, but to define what objectives are and ensuring that we are, even as we align on common metrics, where we are targeting the same things as an entire organization or part of the organization, is really the leadership's purview. Being able to evaluate recommendations and really say, hey, you know what, this is what we agree will drive us forward is another. Being open to experimentation and new ways, especially from data science teams, of testing impact is key, because there's so much that we have available at our fingertips now that we can test, but that requires the openness of leadership to be agile and be open to new paths to take, but in a controlled environment, which in today's world is possible in a lot of cases. So I think it's really driving the vision, direction, you know, and decision making that sets everyone up for success is a key leader responsibility.
I really like what you said is leadership's role is essentially in setting up that vision and that culture so that everyone is participating, everyone is accountable to innovate and use data for better decision making. Russ, over to you for the same question that what you think is the role of leadership in democratizing data across the organization.
So when you say leadership, I tend to think of the business leadership rather than data leadership. And with that context, I would expect the business leadership to, one, set the vision, kind of what you're talking about, but also to get the buy-in of their team members and set the table for an organizational change management. One of the things that we were chatting about back in the green room is that one of the biggest constraints I see on rolling out machine learning models and Gen A models is not the technology or the accuracy of those models, but more of the people involved, their willingness to adapt and change how they go to work every day. You can have the greatest, most effective model in the world, but if the organization is not willing to change and integrate these models into their daily life, daily processes, you're never going to succeed. So to go back to your original question, we've got to have leaders on the business side who at least understand the concepts of what we're building and then can sell that to their organizations for buy-in so that when we produce tools they can use, they're quick to adopt them and get value out of those tools.
If I can just jump in for 1 second, I totally agree with that. And actually, this is something that I feel very passionately about. I think that leadership is probably the most important thing when it comes to becoming more data-driven as an organization. And I think it can take, there's really two key elements, I think, to that really are top of mind for me. The first is, I think, holding, like Mustafa said, holding the organization accountable to making data-driven decisions. And by that, I mean, leaders have to make decisions all the time, and oftentimes they'll ask, and specifically in the business, right? And they'll ask their direct reports or the folks that work for them to come to them with recommendations as to what they should do next. And as a leader, you have a choice to either ask for data to be a part of that or not, right? And the more leaders that can do that, the more leaders that can just take that seriously and make that a core part of how you do business, you're going to see the payoff in that, right? You're going to see that you make smarter decisions. You're going to see that your organization performs better, that your results are better. I think the other part of it as well, and this was already mentioned, I think, is being intellectually curious about what more you can do with data. I actually think that's really one of the coolest things about seeing folks come from a data background work their way into the business, because they think about things from a data perspective. They look at a process and think, this is an area that's ripe for data enrichment, or maybe bringing more data elements into this data set, that's hydrating a system or what have you. But it's almost like a way of thinking about things, right? How can we bring more data to the table just to make the organization smarter and to make what we do better?
Well said. And pivoting to once everyone, a hypothetical situation that everyone in the organization has access to data, but we have to keep control over it. So Mustafa, next question to you is that how do you balance democratize access to data with need for security and governance? And I know you touched upon the partly governance in your previous response. So how do you balance that?
So I think foundationally, having a trustworthy and comprehensive knowledge base is critical. It being accessible to the organization without the need for ad hoc and individual implementations from a technology perspective is critical. Once that's established, when you think about role-based access, going back to my point around data democratization means different things for different partners and different decision makers. And in order to have data democratization, it doesn't mean that the lowest level of granularity and data sensitivity is exposed across all functions of an organization. What we can do is by having that aspect of what is a reporting need, what's a prescriptive insight need, what is a model building need at a feature level, what's a actual integration need. We can enable democratization without exposing sensitivity across the organization and be managed. And again, my other point is minimum access and minimum visibility of PII. And I think that we can go a long way with the capabilities that we have. Some of the vendors here will highlight them, is that you often do not need to expose PII to build a model, let's say. You can work backwards with mechanisms of translation of identity that keep data anonymized. So bringing that to the forefront in how we execute and test use cases is also very critical.
Nice. Russ, what do you have to say about providing access to everyone access to the data, to everyone in the organization?
So I'm not going to try to represent that I know the best solution to this problem, but I can just tell you how we've managed that, which is we've built some tools internally, leveraging scripting, and also some integration into our Tableau server, where you start with the foundation of every data set is locked down. Every PII field is going to be locked down, and it's only granted on exception basis. So then the kind of next step is, well, who grants that access and who approves that access? So we've scripted out some tools where if an end user is wanting access to any type of PII or protected health information, they can actually log a request through a web-based tool that actually goes to the data owner on the business side, not to us. The business owner will then review that request and confirm if that person really has a genuine business or clinical need to see that data, and then can approve that access on either a permanent or a limited time period. So think of it as like a 30-day grant or maybe even a 1-day grant. And everything is automated through this process. So it's not like we're sitting there waiting on these requests to come in. Once it's granted, it flows through our scripts and the access is granted. It's also shut off at the end. And then we have another tool that works in partnership with this that we call break the glass. And you think of it as like when you need to pull the fire alarm, you got to break the glass. And you don't want to break the glass unless it's truly an emergency. So even if a person has been granted access within the tools and technology, anytime that they are accessing private health information, which in our world, private health information is a little bit more, it's higher priority, higher urgency than the general PII. So that's kind of what I default to. But anytime an end user is accessing that through our tools or technology set, they actually have to log a request stating, here's my business or clinical purpose for why I was looking at a patient's real name, a patient ID, anything that's truly private that we have to protect.
I would like to add what you said, and I really liked in terms of making business the owners, not really taking everything on ourselves so that accountability is spread out across the organization. And I'm representing data, we can come into the, in auditing, making sure that in the last 30, 60, 90 days, what kind of requests were provided or granted, and then what was the business reasoning behind it. So we can come in and as an auditor so that we don't impact our day-to-day job. We are doing our day-to-day job, but business are very much involved in the process.
Yeah, that's a great point. And honestly, to close the loop on the story I was telling, we have those audit reports built automatically. So at any time, if we have any type of external auditor that wants to come in and see our process, see how it's been working, we can pull those reports and show all the different people that have accessed any particular field and what the business justification was given at that time and who approved it.
Okay, so I think we are just 3 minutes to the finish line, and next round is going to be a lightning round. Peter, I'll start with you. In a few words, what's the single biggest benefit of democratizing data-driven decision-making in organization?
So I think, again, a lot of it just comes down to when you look at maybe being able to make a function like 5% better or like 5% more efficient or making decisions incrementally better. If you add that up across an entire organization, like if you add that up across, 2,000 person organization, that's going to, as a cumulative effect, that's going to create a lot of impact, right? And so I do believe that, like, we've talked about how there's different types of analytics, right? There's descriptive, there's predictive, there's prescriptive, and different specialists should be involved in different parts of that. But if you can help people nail the basics, like if you can maybe be the heavy lifter that moves the data out of the source system, has the processes in place to flag for PI or sensitive data, get that out of a curated data set, and then enable the business within certain use cases to be able to just answer ad hoc questions, simple questions, on a recurring basis, and move that capacity out of like a centralized team, or allow your team to focus on more like higher strategic projects or more complicated projects. I really do believe that can move the needle quite significantly for organizations.
Mustafa, I'll repeat my question. In a few words, what's the single biggest benefits of democratizing data-driven decision-making in organizations?
The single biggest benefit would be driving results and faster results, more strategic results. Everything from what I was saying earlier about aligning, using metrics across teams, strategizing to influence those objectives through measurable outcomes, making data accessible to actually test approaches that may be forward-thinking and measurable to deliver impact in a cyclical way and in an iterative way, really in the end drives more outcomes for both our customers and our business.
Well said. And Russ?
I'll be short and sweet. I think it comes down to getting data into the hands of the people who have the understanding, the context of what that data means, and also have the ability to do something about it.
Wonderful. So we are at the end of our panel. I hope you benefited from what we brought here. And in summary, what I think is what data democratization is, giving everyone in the company the same chance to use important information. So with that, thank you very much.